I know the difference between a quiet house and an empty one. A quiet house has someone in it who loves you. An empty house just has furniture. I spent 41 years filling ours with both. I build things for a living. Not the glamorous kind, no glass towers, no award-winning facades. I designed the practical things. Community centers in Sudbury, a rec complex outside of Barrie, a handful of school additions up near Thunder Bay. I was a structural engineer, not an architect, and I never pretended otherwise. My name wasn't on any plaques, but I knew which walls held the weight and which ones were just for show. That knowledge, it turns out, transfers. My wife, Lorraine, and I bought our house in Ancaster in 1987. A solid two-story on a corner lot, mature maples out front. A detached garage I converted into a workshop. We raised 2 kids there. Our daughter, Wendy, and our son-in-law, Joel, moved into a townhouse in Hamilton 8 years ago, 40 minutes down the QEW. Our son, Philip, lived in Calgary for a while, came back, then moved to Mississauga, close enough to visit, far enough that he didn't. Lorraine died in the spring of 2019. Pancreatic cancer. 7 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I won't say much about that period except that it rearranged everything inside me that had been bolted down. After she was gone, I found out who my children actually were, not the versions I had assembled from 30 years of hope and selective memory. The real ones. Wendy called maybe once a month. Joel answered for her half the time, which I found strange but didn't say. Philip was better for a while. He'd come for Sunday dinner every few weeks, eat whatever I'd made, leave by 8. But then he got serious with a woman named Tara, and after that, the Sunday dinners became every other week, then once a month, then not at all. I didn't blame Tara. That would have been easier. The truth is, Philip had always found reasons. Tara was just the latest one. I was 63 years old, retired, living alone in a 4-bedroom house in Ancaster with a workshop full of tools I still used and a kitchen I'd learned to cook in after Lorraine died. I was not unhappy exactly, but I was starting to understand something I hadn't let myself understand before, that I had confused being needed with being loved. For 20 years, I had been the person everyone called when something broke. The furnace, the car, the mortgage. Wendy and Joel came to me twice for help with their down payment. First, the townhouse, then when they upgraded to a detached in Dundas. I wrote the checks without a spreadsheet, without terms, without much conversation. That's what you do, I told myself. That's what family is. I believed that the way I believed in load-bearing walls, implicitly, without checking. I should have checked. The first sign was a Tuesday in November, 2 years after Lorraine died. I had a follow-up with my cardiologist at St. Joseph's in Hamilton. Nothing dramatic, just monitoring a minor arrhythmia that had shown up on a routine ECG the previous spring. My doctor, a calm woman named Dr. Okafor, had been tracking it for months. She told me it was manageable, but that I needed to take it seriously. Rest, less salt, no more skipping the medication I'd been quietly deprioritizing since August. I called Wendy on my way out of the parking garage just to tell her. Not because I needed anything, just because she was my daughter and I'd had a doctor's appointment, and that's the kind of thing you tell someone. She answered on the 4th ring. I could hear Joel in the background in what sounded like a television. I told her what Dr. Okafor had said, that my heart was doing something it shouldn't, that it was under control, but that I wanted her to know. She said, "Dad, you really need to stop eating so much red meat." That was the whole conversation. I sat in my car in that parkade for a few minutes after I hung up. I wasn't hurt exactly. I was something colder than hurt. I was starting to take notes. The second sign was Christmas. I had suggested carefully, without pressure, that everyone come to Ancaster. I'd do a full dinner. Turkey, butter tarts, the whole thing. Wendy said they were doing Christmas Eve with Joel's family in Burlington, and Christmas Day was going to be low-key. Philip said Tara's parents were coming in from Red Deer, and they were doing their own thing. I said, of course, no problem, and I meant it, mostly. I ended up having Christmas dinner with my neighbor Ray and his wife, who invited me over when they saw my lights were the only ones on the block still on at 9 o'clock. Ray and his wife were good people. I was grateful. But a man shouldn't be spending Christmas with his neighbors because his children are busy. I want to be clear about something. I am not a martyr. I don't tell this story to make myself the hero of my own suffering. I made mistakes too. I was not an expressive father. I worked long hours when Wendy and Philip were young. I missed things. Lorraine used to say I was better with beams than with feelings, and she wasn't wrong, so I hold some of this. I do. But what happened on the 15th of March, I cannot hold. That one belongs entirely to them. I'd been having chest pains since the morning. Not the sharp, dramatic kind you see in films, the heaviness. A pressure that sat behind my sternum like something had been placed there and left. I took my medication. I drank water. I told myself it was the weather. A front had come through overnight. Temperature dropped 12 degrees. The kind of March day that makes you question why anyone ever settled in this part of the country. By 2 in the afternoon, I was sweating through my shirt sitting in my own kitchen. I called Wendy first. She didn't answer. I called Philip. It went to voicemail. I called Wendy again, and it went to voicemail too. I called 911 at 2:34 in the afternoon. I remember the time because I looked at the microwave clock while I was on with the dispatcher, and I remember thinking it was a strange detail to notice while your heart is doing what mine was doing. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. They were professional and efficient, and one of them, a young man who couldn't have been more than 26, kept talking to me in a steady, calm voice the entire time they were working. I focused on that voice. It helped. At the hospital, the emergency team determined I had experienced a significant cardiac event, not a full myocardial infarction, but close enough that they took it very seriously. I was admitted, stabilized, and moved to the cardiac unit at Hamilton Health Sciences, where I was monitored overnight and into the next day. Somewhere in that first evening, a nurse told me the hospital had contacted my emergency contacts. Both of my children had been reached. Wendy called the nurses' station at 7:15 that evening. The nurse, a patient, steady woman named Diane, told me later what the conversation was like. Wendy had asked about my condition, and Diane had explained that I was stable, but that it had been serious, and that it would mean a great deal if family could come. Wendy said she would try to get there the next day. Diane mentioned gently that the doctors would feel better having family present overnight. Wendy said, "We're actually in the middle of something tonight." Diane told me this the next morning, matter-of-factly, the way nurses tell you things because they believe you deserve to know. I thanked her. I looked at the ceiling for a while. What were they in the middle of? I found out later through a neighbor's daughter who follows Wendy on Instagram. Joel's business partner, a man I had met twice at a backyard barbecue, had turned 40. There was a party at a rented venue in downtown Hamilton. There were photos. Wendy was in several of them, holding a glass of Prosecco, laughing at something off-camera. The timestamp was 8:47 p.m. I had been admitted to the cardiac unit for less than 6 hours. Philip texted me that night at 10:23 p.m. The text said, "Hope you're feeling better, Dad. Crazy day here. We'll try to swing by this week." I read that text 4 times. We'll try to swing by this week. I was in a hospital bed with electrodes on my chest, and my son was going to try to swing by this week. I put the phone face down on the blanket, and I looked at the window, and I watched the Hamilton skyline, the lights of the steel mills across the harbor, and I thought about Lorraine. I thought about what she would have said. Lorraine had a gift for finding the true name of things. She would not have let me soften this or rationalize it or reframe it as a misunderstanding. She would have called it what it was and then figured out what to do next. So, that's what I did. I spent 3 days in hospital. No one came. Ray and his wife drove in on the second day with a container of soup and a paperback mystery novel from the hospital gift shop. Ray sat with me for 2 hours. He is 71 years old and has a bad hip and he drove 40 minutes on the link to sit in a vinyl chair next to my bed. I haven't forgotten that. On the third day, Dr. Okafor came in and told me that with medication and lifestyle adjustments, I had a good prognosis. She was pleased with how I was stabilizing. She asked if I had support at home. I told her I had a neighbor who would check in. She wrote something on her notepad and didn't say anything else about it. I was discharged on a Friday morning. I took a cab home, unlocked my own front door, made myself a cup of tea, and sat in the kitchen and began to think very clearly about a number of things. The house was worth, at that point, roughly $1.1 million. The Ancaster market had done what the Ancaster market does. I had a pension from my years with the engineering firm, a solid RRSP, and a non-registered investment account my father-in-law had set up when Lorraine and I got married, and that I had managed carefully for 35 years. I also had, I now knew, 2 adult children who had decided that a 40th birthday party was more pressing than their father's heart. I am not an impulsive person. I have spent my career doing load calculations. You account for everything before you commit the weight, so I did not do anything quickly. I waited 2 weeks. In that 2 weeks, Wendy called once, 3 days after I got home, to say she'd heard I was out of hospital, and that was great news. She did not ask why I had taken a cab home. She did not ask who had been with me. She talked for 6 minutes about a renovation they were considering for the kitchen in Dundast, and asked if I thought the quote they'd gotten was reasonable. I said it sounded about right. We hung up. Philip came by on a Sunday, 11 days after I was discharged. He brought a box of Timbits. He stayed for 45 minutes and spent most of it on his phone. When he left, he hugged me at the door and said, "You look good, Dad. You had us worried." You had us worried. I held that sentence in my mind for the rest of the afternoon. Then I called my lawyer. Her name is Beverly. I've used her for estate matters since the mid-90s, since before Lorraine got sick, since before any of this. She is meticulous and unsentimental, and very good. I asked her to come to the house on a Tuesday morning when I knew neither Wendy nor Philip would call, because Wendy had her yoga and Philip had a work thing. Beverly sat at my kitchen table, and I laid out what I wanted to do. I want to be clear that she asked me twice whether I was certain and whether I'd thought about it carefully. I told her I'd been thinking about it since the night I watched the Hamilton steel mill lights from a hospital bed alone. She said, "All right then. Here is what I did, and I want to explain it plainly. I updated my will. The house and the contents would go to a charitable foundation, established in Lorraine's name, the Lorraine Margaret Whitfield Foundation, to fund bursaries for trades students in Ontario. Lorraine had been a vocational teacher for 22 years. She believed in that work. The foundation was the right shape for the money. The investment accounts were restructured. Some went to the foundation. A portion went to Ray and his wife, documented properly, with a letter explaining why. Ray would be furious and probably try to refuse it, and I was going to tell him that was too bad. The loans to Wendy and Joel, the 2 down payments, were formally documented as debts owing to my estate, not gifts. I had been treating them as gifts. Beverly informed me that without documentation they likely were gifts, legally speaking, but that going forward any further transfers would be structured differently. I wasn't trying to claw anything back. I was just stopping the outflow. I also quietly removed both children from my emergency contacts at the hospital and updated them to Ray and Beverly herself. Then I did the harder thing. I sold the house. Not immediately. Beverly helped me set a timeline, but I listed it in late May, accepted an offer in June, and by the end of July I had transferred to a 2-bedroom apartment in Burlington, overlooking the lake. Modern building, good maintenance, underground parking so I wouldn't be shoveling in January. I had wanted to downsize since Lorraine died anyway. I just needed a reason that had enough weight to move me. I told neither Wendy nor Philip until the house was sold. I informed them by letter, not email. A letter typed and mailed the old way. I explained that I had sold the house and moved. I explained, without accusation, what had happened in March. The hospital, the 3 days, the cab ride home. I explained that I had done some thinking about what my life looked like and what I wanted the second half of my 70s to look like, and that I had made some decisions accordingly. I told them I loved them. That was true, and I wanted it on the record. I told them I had updated my estate documents and that Beverly could answer questions about specifics when the time came. I told them they were welcome to come see the new apartment if they wanted to. I mailed the letters on a Thursday. On Saturday morning, my phone started ringing. Wendy called 4 times before noon. I answered the 3rd call. She was not cruel. I want to say that. She was shocked, and she was upset, and she kept saying she didn't understand. I told her I thought she did understand, actually, and that I wasn't angry, which was mostly true by then. She said she had been planning to come to the hospital, that things had just gotten complicated that week. I said I knew about the party. She went quiet. After a moment, she asked about the house. I told her it was sold. She asked about the will. I told her Beverly can speak to her about the estate when the time was appropriate. She cried. I let her. I didn't tell her not to cry, and I didn't apologize, and I didn't explain myself beyond what the letter had already said. Philip called that afternoon. He was angrier than Wendy, which surprised me less than it probably should have. He said I was being dramatic. He said I was punishing them for one mistake. I told him it wasn't one mistake, and he knew it wasn't, and I wasn't interested in arguing about the inventory. He said he was going to drive to Burlington, and I told him he was welcome to. He didn't come. The following week, Wendy and Joel came to the apartment. Joel shook my hand at the door and was polite in the stiff way of someone who knows he is not in a position to be anything else. We sat in the living room and looked at the lake for a while. Wendy asked if there was anything she could do. I said yes. I said she could come for dinner sometime, not to fix anything, just for dinner. I said I was a decent cook now, and the apartment had a good kitchen. She said she'd like that. I don't know if it will happen. I've stopped predicting what my children will do. What I know is that I am sitting in my apartment in Burlington on a Tuesday evening in November, watching the light change over Lake Ontario, and I am not waiting for anyone to call. My RRSP is intact. The foundation is established. The bursary applications for the spring intake are already coming in. Beverly forwarded the first batch to me last week. Trade students from Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie and Kenora and Fort Frances. Young people learning to do the practical things. The Rain would have liked that very much. I build things for a living. I know which walls hold the weight. And I know now with the certainty of someone who has had to learn it the hard way, that you cannot keep holding up a structure that was built only to take from you and expect to still be standing when winter comes. The lake is gray today, beautiful, but gray, and I find I don't mind the quiet anymore. There's a thing that happens when you've been a builder your whole life. You start to believe that if something is broken, you can fix it. You find the fault in the structure, you reinforce it, and you carry on. I applied that thinking to everything, bridges, foundations, and for a long time to my family. What I understand now, sitting on the other side of all of it, is that some things don't break because of bad engineering. They break because the people involved decided, quietly and over many years, that they didn't need to do the maintenance. Wendy didn't stop caring about me in one night. Philip didn't become absent in one text. Those were just the moments when I finally stopped looking away. There's a kind of honesty that's very hard to come by, and it has nothing to do with what you say to other people. It's the honesty you apply to yourself, the willingness to look at a situation clearly and call it what it is, not what you wish it were. For years I told myself that my children were busy, that life gets complicated, that I hadn't always been the most expressive father, and so some of this was owed. And some of that was true, but there's a difference between accounting for your own shortcomings and using them to excuse someone else's. I had to learn that difference from a hospital bed at 2 a.m, alone, watching the lights of the steel mills across the harbor. That's when I understood something about what it means to have a clear mind. Not clever, clear. Clever finds ways around hard truths. Clear just looks at them. When the nurse told me what Wendy had said on the phone, when Philip's text came in at 10:23 at night, I didn't perform anger or collapse into grief. I got quiet and I got precise. I thought about what the numbers actually said. I thought about the house, the accounts, the loans I'd been calling gifts. I thought about Lorraine and what she would have named this, and then I started planning. People sometimes ask whether what I did was hard. Selling the house, updating the will, moving to Burlington alone. And, I want to be honest, the paperwork wasn't hard. Beverly handled most of it, and she is very good. What was hard was the moment I understood that doing the right thing for myself was going to cause pain to people I love. That's the part nobody tells you about. Strength isn't the absence of hesitation. It's choosing to act anyway, when every soft instinct in you is looking for a reason to wait another month. Give them one more chance. Try one more Sunday dinner. Ray drove 40 minutes on a bad hip to sit with me in a vinyl chair. He brought soup and a paperback, and he stayed 2 hours, and he didn't say much. That's the whole lesson, really. Not in the will, not in the foundation, not in the apartment over the lake. In Ray, and the fact that sometimes the person who shows up is not the person you expected, and that when you see it clearly, when you're honest enough and steady enough and brave enough to see it, you know exactly what it means and what to do next. I built things my whole life. I'm still building, just differently now.